Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we are going to be covering how a major retailer successfully performed a divestiture. Our speaker today is Michael Brangs. He has over 20 years of experience in the software industry and has been deploying identity management solutions since joining Open Network Technologies in 2000 and later with Oblix. He's currently Chief Revenue Officer and Managing Partner with Optimal IBM. Mr. Brangs is a recognized identity management expert and has been a guest speaker at many events, including Oracle Open World, Digital ID World, the Gartner Identity and Access Management Summit, and the No Identity Summit. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce Mike and let you take it away.
Thanks, Matt. Can you hear me okay? Just do a sound check.
Yep, can hear you great.
Great. So today we're going to do a customer case study and show how a major retailer performed that divestiture that Matt had mentioned. So as a part of the divestiture from the parent company, a little background, I'm not going to disclose the company name, but both companies, both parent and the child company, are separately listed on the stock exchange. So very large retailer. Almost all of the IT was done by the parent company. So while it was a subsidiary, very little was done in terms of IT at the subsidiary. So that presents a challenge right from the start on that. I do also want to let everybody know it'll probably be about a half hour just in terms of the presentation. We'll leave time for questions and answers, so it's not going to be a full hour. The parent company that it was divesting from was very, I'll call it classic old school. Everything on-premise. They had on-premise Exchange. They had mainframe. So very old school. They did have an agreement. Both companies knew that while they were going to be separating, you couldn't do it immediately and just cut the tie. So they had an agreement to be able to use the quote ex-parent company's IT resources for about a 2-year time frame. That said, the company that was divesting did not want to do it for very long at all. So while they had 2 years, they wanted to get off as quickly as they could. So the first step that they did was hired an IT consulting company, not us, it was some IT consulting company, obviously we're on the software side, to come in and build out a plan. Interestingly enough, it's really the exact opposite of M&A in the sense, mergers and acquisitions, you have to figure out where the redundancies are, which technologies you're going to use from which company. In this case, you're essentially starting a company from scratch because you're pulling off of the old IT infrastructure and now you have to go build, which you didn't have yesterday, but yet you're already up and running as a company. So that's a little bit of a challenge in and of itself right there of to how to move those over. Additionally, just in terms of the challenges and the requirements, as I mentioned, almost all the IT was done by that parent, so they have very little IT staff to begin with. And from the get, they didn't really know that they really want to go build up a whole lot of IT staff that they didn't have and go do that. The current staff was not familiar with technologies really such as federation or multi-factor. They knew what it was, but in terms of the details of actually how to go deploy it, the technical pieces, were not proficient with that. So they would, that's kind of almost the build versus buy. Do they go hire those resources and then buy product and go deploy it? The CIO as well was very keen that, the world of retailing is not what it used to be. A lot of retailers are struggling and or going out of business. And so how do they stay nimble and adapt quickly to changes? That was very much on the forefront of the CIO in terms of being able to do that and also keep their costs low. Again, retailing is completely different in this day and age. So the first thing they really did was came up a list of applications that they were going to need and the basic requirements for them. So they knew they needed payroll, the normal things, HR system. So they came up, vetted out what technologies they actually wanted to use, what applications, and kind of laid them out as well in terms of order that they would need these done. They also knew that they had to handle not only the employees at I'll say corporate, but they have franchise stores. So some are corporate-owned stores, but many are franchised. So the people that work at the store, they're not directly employees of the retailer, but really rather of the franchise. So the franchise is independently owned, and the owner of that, they really work for them. yet they have to have accesses to applications and resources of the retailer itself. They definitely had a lot of we don't know what we don't know. So that presents a challenge when you don't know or feel you know everything. But they did know they needed help. There was no doubt about that. They researched the vendors that provided expertise in this space, and they made the selection. And this is where they chose to come and become all in on the cloud, to the Optimal Cloud provided by us, Optimal IDM. This is where I joke that Microsoft for many years has said, they were all in on the cloud, and well, they're not. How this retailer is truly all in is 100% of this new infrastructure would be hosted and serviced in the cloud. They literally would be the largest retailer with no data center. So this is definitely forward thinking as you look to, keep pace in the retailing industry of today. Everything Active Directory hosted by us in Azure. So we host a private Active Directory in Azure. HR, payroll, training, inventory, everything provided there. The only thing that's, quote, non-cloud is the point of sale systems at the store. And most staff actually could be remote and work from home. So trying to reduce the footprint of their corporate office as much as possible, saving on costs there, that staff could actually work from home from the corporate side. So we would perform everything in terms of all the identity management functions, which definitely one of the reasons we likely won the business is from a differentiator standpoint. Many other vendors in the SSO space don't do that, meaning some admin actually has to go into a portal and configure the application that they want for SSO. With our solution, our customer doesn't have to do anything, literally just be a liaison between us and tell them, I want Salesforce, I want Concur, and we do all the configuration for them. So this also fit really well with them not having, or with them having limited IT as well. So here's kind of like an architecture diagram of how that kind of looks in terms of what we did was we actually also sourced another Active Directory that they could domain join their machines to. We didn't actually want it to be in the force that we host and manage for them. So we actually sync identities over to a second Active Directory where they can domain join machines there. And then we're providing the SSO into all the different applications, Concur, SAP, ServiceNow, etc. So this is also really kind of what we did in terms of architecture. We do have a VPN back to their environment, so or we commonly do. Sorry, in this particular case, we don't because of the way that they're set up. But one of the things I like to talk about here, where people would worry, is cloud secure. I'll give you an example of one customer where we did deploy it like this, where we are VPN'd back to the customer's environment. Unfortunately, they got hit with a ransomware, wiped out all their servers within their infrastructure, quickly spread across those. But the servers that we host and manage weren't affected. And the simple reason is while we still had a VPN, we were on their corporate network. They weren't affected, or our servers were not affected because we don't have those ports open. So it's actually an instance where you can see that cloud can be more secure for that. So back to the retailer. So where do you start? Well, probably the most mission critical application for every company, which is email. They decided Office 365 would be the email platform. We acquired the different domains that they needed, configured that with Office 365. We created that Active Directory I spoke of, and provisioned the first set of initial employees. Azure AD Connect was then configured to sync the identities to 365, and email went live within a week of signing contracts with us. So quick up and running, very little for them to do. It was really our staff having to configure that and setting those up. Next up was really providing the federation and provisioning into the other applications. So here's kind of a sampling of the applications they needed. UltiPro is their HR system. They use ServiceNow, Concur, so some common ones. NetSuite, that's now bought by Oracle, Ariba. So the different applications that they needed SSO into, and obviously some of them you do provisioning into that as well. So With the HR and the data feeds, I mentioned it was UltiPro. We get data feeds daily, and that essentially provides a dump of the employees, the hires, the fires in the file. And then our system automatically provisions the new employees, modifies existing if any data changed, or deletes the users or disables them if they've left the organization. We then also provision taking that raw data into other systems as well. So some of that data gets provisioned. We'll touch upon that in a second as well. One of the features that they took advantage of as well that is really unique to our product when comparing to other SSO vendors is our delegated administration. So each store is set up as an organization, and then the store owner can be a delegated administrator for that store. So what that allows them to do is actually, as we mentioned, there are store employees down there. That store manager can create new users, manage those users, and manage their access to apps via our web GUI. So definitely taking advantage of the delegated administration model to push that administration down to the stores where likely it belongs. There were some challenges along the way. There always are. Some really in terms of the data. So as I mentioned, it says multiple steps or flows. So for an example, some of the data that would flow into Concur, we got it from HR, we'd flow that data into Concur, then that data would actually move down to NetSuite, and then the store managers would access NetSuite, and some of the data may change at that point where it wasn't truly authoritative in HR. When they make the changes, that would flow, the data changes that happened there would flow back into Concur. So some of that wasn't known at the time from a process procedure, so that was along the way in terms of the implementation. It wasn't difficult, but it was more of a go back to the we don't know what we don't know scenario. There definitely, and this wasn't really a problem per se, it was just an unknown, which was there were definitely more custom user attributes than initially thought. So it kind of just grew over time. Again, that's the we don't know what we don't know scenario for that. Some of the apps that we federated to when our staff would get on a call with the end application vendor, they definitely lacked a little knowledge on federation. So this actually really did further validate that they made the right choice, in the sense we were able to ask the question in multiple ways and or guide that vendor in providing the right answer, and likely they didn't have the expertise, meaning the retailer itself didn't have the expertise to know what the right questions would be to do the implementation. So the fact that we were there and able to do that, being federation experts, definitely helped validate that they made the right choice to essentially use our managed service and have us do all the heavy lifting. They've definitely seen the value in our detailed auditing and reporting, and there's 3 good examples of that. Email once stopped at one of the stores. Using the auditing and reporting, they were able to determine, and essentially some of those users were disabled. Well, email's not going to work if you're disabled, but they were able to see who actually made that change and disabled those users. In a second instance, they thought one of the executives' emails was hacked, but again, utilizing the reports, they were able to actually see all the authentication attempts, including the failures, the IP address of where that was coming from, and could quickly determine that it was a legitimate scenario where the old password was in an app and it just kept locking out the account. And then in a third instance, the forensics that we have in the data determined that an employee had been phished. So they called our help desk, thought we think this employee accidentally clicked a link and was phished, and indeed that is what happened. We could see the login attempts and that somebody was logging in using that person's account from Africa. They don't have any infrastructure or anything in Africa, so we actually now, part of our service, one of the abilities we have is to block that. So we block now anything from Africa, and I think they've also educated their employees a little bit on what not to do. So from timelines, I mentioned that in terms of the Active Directory and email, that was live within a week. all those other systems that I had on that slide deck, they were actually all implemented, configured in about a 3-month time frame. Everything was up and running and live. Their next step and what they look to do next is implement MFA. And like many of our customers, they're likely going to implement it where the end user ultimately chooses how the MFA is going to work, whether that's SMS, a call to the phone, and that could be a landline. It could also be a cell phone, emailing of a one-time password, TOTP, and push. We support all of those. The push in particular for Android and iOS, that could be fingerprint if you have fingerprint enabled on your phone, and on iOS X, that does facial recognition as well. And so many of our customers do implement that where kind of on the landing page, you're accessing an application that needs multi-factor, you're presented with what would you like to do based on your settings as well. That's the end of the presentation.